Okay, let's dive in. We're starting today with an image, and it's one of those images that I think it just hits you immediately. It'll resonate with anyone who's ever felt that, that constant, relentless pressure to prove yourself,
Hmm.
to get the next thing, the next title, the next piece of paper, just so you can finally be taken seriously.
It's the image of the staircase.
Yes.
It's a very clean, simple image, almost deceptively so.
Yeah.
But within its structure, it holds this immense tension that we're seeing across so many cultures and systems.
Exactly. The source material talks about seeing this a literal staircase, and on each step there's a label: BA, MA, PhD. And the thing that grabs you isn't the climb itself, it's the message. It's a philosophy of inadequacy built right into the architecture.
It is. At the very bottom, it's quite blunt.
Yeah.
No formal qualification, not enough.
Right. And then you climb, you do the work, you get to the very top, and the message is still there. It's a bit more polished, maybe, but it's the same. That PhD. And it says, still not enough.
The author noted that they stood there looking at it for a long time. And I think we all can understand why. That feeling of systemic incompleteness is just so familiar.
It really is. It's that feeling of always waiting for permission from somewhere outside of yourself before you're allowed to just be trusted.
And this is the critical point we have to establish right away for this deep dive.
Yeah.
This is not a critique of education. The source is very clear on this. Deep, rigorous learning is profoundly valuable. It builds real competence. It humbles you.
But the staircase isn't about education. Not really.
No,
Yeah.
it is about legitimacy. It's about a system where the pursuit of knowledge has become confused with the acquisition of permission.
That's the tension, isn't it? How easily trust gets postponed. Legitimacy isn't treated as something you have, something that flows from your character or your wisdom. It's a prize you get later.
Only after one more proof, one more title, one more confirmation from an external authority.
So our mission today is to really trace that pattern, this shared unease, as the source puts it, that you can feel in an office in São Paulo, a university in Seoul, a government agency in Berlin. It's this hesitation to trust basic human judgment.
To trust the things that are not easily quantified, without a stamp, a signature, some kind of external validation.
We build these ladders, and then we just feel compelled to keep climbing them, often without ever asking if the ladder itself is leaning against the right wall.
We are exploring a quiet, almost invisible migration, the displacement of trust, away from people and into systems, and we really must understand the cost of that, especially for leadership.
Which brings us right into our first section, the infinite climb, where this whole process of qualification becomes a way to just permanently postpone trust.
Yes, if we start there with this core idea, the migration of trust, we can see a really profound cultural shift.
From what to what?
Well, historically, in many traditions, particularly in East Asia, legitimacy grew from concepts like shengren, the wise person. Authority came from presence, from character demonstrated over time, from lived wisdom.
So trust was the default? It was inherent until you did something to lose it?
In many ways, yes. And now we are slowly, methodically shifting that trust away from the person, their story, their character, how they listen, and we're placing it into the system that issued the piece of paper.
So it's not about who you are anymore. It's about where you got your permission slip.
That's a very direct way to put it, but yes. And that turns legitimacy into a conditional state. It's not a foundation you stand on. It's a target you have to keep hitting over and over again.
You're only legitimate if you stay on that ladder. The moment you stop climbing, you start to slide. And that moment of just being trusted unconditionally for what you know and who you are, it just never arrives.
And this creates a profound systemic fatigue. It affects everyone. You can have a leader with 20, 30 years of incredible real-world experience, and they still feel this pressure to go get another certification, another degree, just to seem relevant to a younger manager whose only legitimacy comes from the newest title on their resume.
The system forces them into this cycle of justifying themselves over and over again because their lived experience just isn't enough on its own. It's not verifiable in the same way.
Exactly.
But hold on. I mean, the counter-argument here is pretty obvious, isn't it? We need standards. We have to have competence. If we just throw out credentials, how do we know anyone is qualified to do anything? Isn't this just a necessary evil for a complex society?
And that is the perfect question, because it brings us to the sacrifice we're making. It's not competence that we lose. Competence, as you say, can be measured. It can be tested.
So what is it we lose?
The single most critical element that disappears when qualification completely replaces trust is judgment.
Okay, let's define that. That distinction feels like the pivot for this whole conversation. Competence is knowing the rules. What is judgment?
Judgment is what's required when the rules run out. It is that uniquely human ability to take in conflicting, messy information, to sit with real uncertainty, and then to make an effective ethical choice in a situation that has no precedent.
So competence is for the known world. Judgment is for the unknown.
Precisely. Competence handles the past. Judgment navigates the future.
I think we need an example here to make it really solid for everyone listening. Let's take medicine. A doctor has all the right degrees, all the certifications, supremely competent. They know the exact protocol for treating a specific condition based on all the published data. That's competence.
Yes, following the established guidelines perfectly.
Mm.
But judgment is what happens when the patient doesn't follow the textbook. The symptoms are strange, the data is incomplete, the standard protocol just doesn't feel right.
The competent doctor, the one rewarded by the system, follows the checklist because that's the verifiable, defensible action.
Even if their intuition tells them it's the wrong path. But the doctor with judgment understands the principles behind the rules. They see the divergence, they take an adaptive risk, and crucially, they accept the personal responsibility for that decision.
And our system, the one built on this staircase of verification, it rewards the first doctor, the one who followed the procedure. Because their actions are safe, they're auditable. The second doctor, the one who actually saved the patient by using judgment, they took a huge career risk.
Exactly. We have built environments that systematically favor procedural adherence over adaptive brilliance. And when we do that, we stop asking the most important, most human questions.
Such as?
We stop asking, how does this person listen? There's no certificate for listening. We stop asking, how do they handle uncertainty? Which is the true test of any leader.
And we stop asking what they do when the system itself is the problem.
Yes. Instead, we default to what's easy to measure. Can they be verified? Can they be ranked? And, most importantly for the system, can they be easily replaced by someone else with the same credentials?
It feels safer, it feels more in control, but it fundamentally changes what we value in people. It replaces that messy human work of ethical decision-making with just following the rules.
And for you listening, whether you're managing a team or just trying to build a career, this is so important to understand. When a system prizes control over judgment, it will freeze up the moment a real crisis hits, a crisis the credentials were never designed for.
Let's push on this one more time. Competence versus judgment. What about in a business context, say a big, complex merger?
A perfect example. Competence is the finance team correctly valuing the assets. It's the legal team drafting the contracts perfectly. That is all absolutely essential. That's what the MBA promises.
But most mergers don't fail because the math was wrong.
No, they fail because of culture clash. They fail because of fear, mismanaged politics, a lack of trust. Judgment is what allows a leader to read the unspoken anxieties in a room. Judgment is what tells them when to slow down, when to prioritize human connection over a deadline in a spreadsheet.
And you can't learn that from a textbook.
You learn it through experience, often costly experience. You learn it by being willing to accept that some things cannot be perfectly controlled.
So we confuse control with credibility. And that confusion really sets the stage for the global picture we're about to explore.
It does, because while this dependency on external proof is now a global currency, the way different cultures absorb that pressure, the stories they tell themselves about it, that is incredibly diverse.
And that's what we need to get into. Not just that everyone...
And the intention behind that is noble. It is fundamentally good. But the consequence, as we've been discussing, is that trust migrates into the system itself. If you've passed the standardized European framework, you are deemed trustworthy. It's almost a legal definition.
So what happens to individual judgment when everything becomes a procedure?
It becomes procedural judgment. You are trusted to follow the procedure. You're not necessarily trusted to deviate from it, even when the situation demands it.
And if something goes wrong?
If you follow the checklist, you can often deflect responsibility back to the system. You can say, I did what the standard required. The system didn't account for this. Responsibility finds refuge in compliance.
So how does that affect leadership if the system is what grants you authority, not your character?
Then leadership stops being something you grow into, something rooted in demonstrated wisdom. It becomes something you are granted once your resume hits a certain threshold. The title is there, but the relational trust, the true authority, might be completely absent. And so you have to rely on positional power, not real influence.
That feels like it could create real problems, especially when things are changing fast. If your whole system is built on rigid, established standards, How do you deal with something totally new, a new technology, a climate crisis?
That is the risk. The source suggests it can lead to a kind of systemic inertia. The system is brilliant at managing the known risks it was built for. But when a truly novel threat appears, one that requires adaptive moral judgment outside the compliance manual, the response is often too slow, too cautious.
Because everyone is trained to fear accountability more than they're trained to exercise judgment.
Exactly. And that rigidity is a profound, if unintended, cost.
Let's pivot now, pretty sharply, to North America.
Oh.
Because the feeling there is completely different. The climb seems to speed up, and the motivation isn't really safety, it's framed as leverage and performance.
Yes, the climb in North America is often much faster, much more intense. It's driven by fierce economic competition, by the high cost of education. A degree isn't just proof of learning, it's a transactional tool. It's leverage in a very visible, very competitive market.
It's a key part of your personal brand. You need it to get on that fast track, to show a return on your investment.
And so trust becomes intensely conditional. It is tied directly and visibly to performance. You are trusted only as long as you are delivering measurable results. Only as long as your story of success is visible and polished.
It's a performance treadmill. The credential gets you on, but you have to keep running faster and faster, or you fall off. The moment you stop climbing, your legitimacy starts to fade.
We see this in the obsession with constant reskilling. The next certification, the next acronym for the resume. The credential opens the door, but only perpetual performance will keep you in the room.
What's the psychological toll of that? The source mentions that the fatigue comes early. What does that look like?
The exhaustion comes from maintaining the narrative. It's not just doing the work. It's the constant need to prove you're doing the work and that the work is a success. You have to optimize for things that look good on paper speed, scale, immediate impact.
And that can come at the expense of the slower, deeper work that actually builds long-term health, right? The relational work that doesn't have a clear metric.
Precisely. And the risk of failure becomes terrifying. Because if your entire brand is built on this scaffolding of visible success, a single public misstep can feel like a total collapse. There's very little grace for errors in judgment. Only the performance metrics seem to matter.
So leaders can burn out really early, just exhausted from the work of constantly justifying their own existence.
Long before they have reached a true maturity of judgment.
Yes. Okay, let's move east now, to East Asia, where the whole conversation around qualification feels deeper, older, and carries a very different kind of weight. You've written about this East-West exchange a lot. How does moral weight change the dynamic?
This context is so important because the stakes are not merely individual or professional. They are deeply cultural, deeply familial. In places like China, Korea, Japan, the major exam, the Gaokao, the Sunagang, it is not just an academic test.
Right. It's something more.
It is a test of endurance, of honor, of spiritual commitment. It reflects a value system rooted in collective duty and sacrifice.
So the qualification itself carries the weight of a whole family, sometimes generations.
Exactly. The journey to get that credential is often funded by the sacrifices of parents, of grandparents. All their hopes, their resources are invested in this one person's path. So when a young person sits for that exam, they are not just taking a test for themselves. They are carrying the trust of their entire lineage.
Which means the trust you gain when you succeed is also collective. It gives you personal credibility, yes, but it also fulfills this huge web of moral obligations to your family.
And the reverse is also true. The source highlights this very clearly. Failure is almost never a private matter. The shame of not succeeding, of not living up to the promise of that credential, it reflects on everyone who supported you.
That's a level of pressure that's hard for many in the West to even comprehend. How does that shape leadership and judgment?
It creates an intense demand for conformity. Leadership in these systems tends to emerge very, very carefully, and often only after an individual has proven their conformity beyond any doubt. Conformity to social expectations, to traditional values, and to the brutal standards of the credentialing process itself.
So the system values endurance and predictability over, say, disruptive innovation.
It values the moral character that is believed to be forged through that endurance. Unpredictability, even brilliant unpredictability, can be seen as a threat to the collective trust that was so hard-won. The qualification is a bridge built by everyone, and that bridge must be stable.
Let's continue south to South and Southeast Asia. Here, the narrative shifts again. Education is framed as a promise of escape.
Yes, it's a path to dignity, to stability, to a life that is fundamentally different from the one you were born into. The qualification is seen as a societal elevator, a way to move beyond inherited circumstances.
But the source flags a huge structural problem here. The staircase is it's too crowded.
That is the central tension. The rate of qualification is growing much, much faster than the rate of economic opportunity. You have universities graduating huge numbers of highly competent, verified people into markets that simply cannot absorb them.
So you have all this competence, all this verification, but a scarcity of opportunity. What does that do to trust?
It makes trust intensely competitive. When the market is flooded with qualified people, the credential itself gets diluted.
Yeah.
It doesn't guarantee trust anymore. Only a very small number, the ones who get the few prestigious jobs, are seen as having truly fulfilled the promise.
And what happens to everyone else? The ones with the degrees, but no job to match.
Their competence isn't the issue, but their legitimacy is stalled because the system has failed them. Their diploma becomes a symbol of a promise that society couldn't keep.
It's a marker of potential that was never realized.
Yes, and it creates a great deal of social fragility.
Yeah.
You have a brain drain, with talented people leaving the region to find the opportunity their credentials were supposed to provide at home. The system trained them for the climb, but didn't build enough room at the top.
Which brings us to a place where this conflict is maybe at its most stark. The continent of Africa and this clash between local wisdom and global credentials.
This is a profound point in the source material. In many African contexts, trust has historically long preceded certification.
Oh, so?
Authority and legitimacy grew organically, from being present in a community over a long time, from contributing, from lived, embodied wisdom. Trust was relational. It was earned through character, demonstrated over decades.
But the global systems, NGOs, international banks, corporations, they don't see that.
They often fail to recognize it completely. They dismiss this deep local legitimacy as informal or anecdotal because it doesn't come with a piece of paper from a recognized institution.
Can you give us an example of what that looks like?
Of course. You might have a community elder who has successfully managed resources and mediated conflicts for 40 years. They possess an immense context-specific judgment. Then, a young consultant arrives from overseas with a master's degree from a top university.
And the global system defaults its trust to the consultant.
Immediately. The elder's wisdom is discounted, even though it's been proven effective on the ground for generations. So to be heard on the global stage, to even get a seat at the table, local leaders are forced to translate themselves.
Translate themselves into foreign credentials. That's a powerful phrase from the source.
It is, and it comes at a great cost. They gain the global verification, but they risk losing the connection to the very local context that made them wise leaders in the first place. The qualification becomes a form of code switching that can feel alienating to their own people.
So they have to choose between being effective at home and being recognized abroad.
It's a deep and painful irony. The global systems demand credentials in the name of effectiveness, while simultaneously discarding the very wisdom required for true, sustainable success.
Okay, our last stop on this global tour, Latin America. Here we see something different again, a kind of resistance to putting trust in institutions.
Yes. Trust in Latin America often resides very strongly in people, in personal relationships and networks. This is often because formal institutions, governments, markets, has historically been less stable.
So a degree is good, it helps, but it's not a guarantee of protection.
Exactly. Relying only on your paper credential in an environment that can change rapidly and unpredictably is a very risky strategy. So leadership has to be something else.
It has to be relational, adaptive, resilient.
Precisely. Your influence depends on your personal network, on your agility, on your demonstrated loyalty. Trust is in the person and their word, not the organization they happen to work for today.
But I can imagine how an external system, one that's obsessed with verification of procedure, would see that.
It is profoundly misread. This relational strength is often labeled by outsiders as instability or favoritism or worse, because it doesn't fit the neat procedural models of Europe or the performance metrics of North America. It just looks messy.
When in reality, that relational network is the actual source of stability in an unstable environment. It's not a weakness, it's a highly evolved form of strength.
It is. It is an adaptation that prioritizes human connection over bureaucratic rules.
Yeah.
It recognizes that if you can't trust the institution, you must be able to trust the character of the individual. And that requires a kind of relational investment that a credential can never capture.
So if we pull back and look at all 6 of these, Europe's safety, North America's performance, East Asia's moral weight, the competition in South Asia, the wisdom conflict in Africa, and Latin America's relational strength. What's the common thread?
They are all logical, if sometimes exhausting, responses to the same pressure, a global pressure to displace trust with verification. Qualification has become this universal currency, and in the process, trust has become fragile, conditional, and always postponed, and that has enormous systemic consequences.
Which takes us right into our third section, the cost of these brittle systems, and what happens when trust goes underground. And we have to start with the central mistake in all of this: confusing control with credibility.
This confusion is really the heart of the matter. We have, on a global scale, confused control, which we get from metrics, from audits, from verifiable compliance, with credibility, which can only be earned through trust, judgment, and character over time.
We want control because it feels safe. It feels manageable. If we can just verify everyone and everything, we think we can eliminate risk. But the source makes this incredible point. Qualifications matter, they're the foundation, but they were never meant to carry the entire weight of legitimacy.
We have asked a simple piece of paper to do the work of human character, and the result is not a more efficient or safer system. When you build a system primarily on control, it doesn't become resilient, it becomes brittle.
Define that for us. What does a brittle system look like in an organization?
A brittle system is one that functions perfectly under predictable stress. The day-to-day work, the compliance checks, its people are trained perfectly for that. But it cannot flex or adapt when a truly novel, high-stakes pressure hits. It doesn't bend. It shatters.
Right. I can picture a huge financial regulator. They hire thousands of people with the best degrees. They have layers and layers of checklists. But then some completely new, unforeseen financial product emerges, and the entire system, with all its verified experts, completely misses the crash that's coming.
That is systemic brittleness. The auditors were all perfectly competent. They checked every box they were trained to check. But because the entire architecture of trust was built on verifying compliance with known rules, they lacked the judgment to see a fundamental risk was off the checklist.
They confuse control over the existing procedures with credibility about the entire market.
Yes, the system effectively starves itself of the one human quality it needs to survive the unknown. And at the same time, trust doesn't just vanish when you kick it out of the formal system. It follows a law of sociology. It has to go somewhere.
It finds a new home. This is that new geography of trust the source talks about. Where does it go?
It moves into the shadows, into the informal spaces that don't appear on any organizational chart. When people can't trust the official channels, which are slow and rigid, they put their trust in networks that are built on character and proven effectiveness.
The informal networks, the people who know how things actually work, no matter what the official manual says.
Exactly. The quiet loyalties built through shared experience, not assigned titles. And most importantly, it manifests as workarounds. The unofficial processes people invent to get things done when the formal system is too slow or too broken to deal with reality.
That's a fascinating idea. Are you saying that these huge verified systems, the staircase, would actually collapse if it weren't for all these unverified informal networks holding them together?
In many cases, yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. And this is critical because this displacement leads to a vacuum of leadership. When real, authentic trust leaves the formal system, leadership follows it into those informal spaces.
So the people with the real influence, the ones who can actually make things happen, might not be the ones at the top of the official ladder.
Often they are not. They are the most trusted nodes in the shadow network.
That is the ultimate irony of this whole thing. In our quest for total safety and verification, we've built systems that undermine their own ability to foster real leadership. The most effective leaders are forced to operate in the margins, using judgment that would never pass an audit, but is the only thing keeping the whole enterprise afloat.
We have created a ghost structure of efficiency. There is the formal, verifiable structure of control. And then there's the shadow structure of trust and judgment that actually handles complexity. And the more a system obsesses over credentials, the more vital and invisible that shadow structure becomes.
And for anyone listening who's trying to lead in one of those systems, the mental gymnastics must be exhausting. You have to pay tribute to the formal staircase, but you have to rely on the informal network to actually be effective.
That is the daily cost. It is the fatigue we started with, the constant anxiety that your actual wisdom, your lived experience, will be dismissed as non-compliant because it doesn't fit neatly into a box. The source suggests that if our systems fail in the next decade, it won't be from a lack of standards, it will be because we starved them of judgment.
We've come on this whole journey, from that single image of the staircase through all these global pressures to this idea of brittle systems and hidden loyalties. And it all leads us to this final reflective challenge.
It is less of an answer and more a question, a profound question that the source poses to all of us.
We've seen how seductive the staircase is. It promises clarity, safety, a guaranteed path. But we've also seen how it postpones the one thing we actually need, which is inherent trust.
And so we come back to that final question
Mm.
for you listening. Are we willing to let trust speak again?
And this can't just be a simple feel-good question about trusting your gut. It's a structural challenge. Letting trust speak again means actively creating the conditions for it to exist. It means letting go of our obsession with total control.
And those conditions, as our global tour showed us, are demanding. It means we have to trust across cultures, to recognize that the moral weight of endurance in East Asia and the relational strength in Latin America are both valid forms of legitimacy.
It means we have to trust across biographies, to value the wisdom that comes from a life of experience, even if it doesn't have the right sequence of degrees on paper, to stop demanding that every leader has climbed the exact same staircase.
And, perhaps most difficult of all, it means trusting across different ways of knowing. Trusting embodied knowledge, intuitive judgment, lived wisdom, even when we can't measure it or put it in a spreadsheet. It means valuing the elders' wisdom as much as the consultant's analysis.
The ultimate implication, then, is that we have to stop trying to force everyone to climb the same staircase. We have to accept that there are different paths to legitimacy, different sources of authority.
And if we can find the willingness to do that, to make that radical shift away from control and back toward credibility, what kind of leadership might finally become possible? A leadership that is not burdened by the endless task of proving its own worth, but is finally free to exercise judgment. That is the question for you to explore in your own world long after our conversation ends.